So have we tried doing the questions which you have mentioned in the last class? From the areas which you have covered. So today we will be discussing about the topics which are needed for the next two areas, that is acquisition and mergers, and with respect to cooperative construction. So I will be discussing the theories which relates to that topics today. Okay. So debt with respect to the valuation. So first of all, we'll discuss about the debt valuation. How will you value the debt? How will you value the debt? How will you calculate the value of a debt? In a simple concept, how will you calculate the value of a debt? So whenever you are asked to calculate a value of an item, it should be the present value of future received, and it will get discounted at the required rate of return. Yeah, that's how we'll calculate the value of a debt. Is it clear, everyone? Can you reply in the chat? So for example, let's say a company have a 10% bond in issue, and which is redeemable 5 years time at a premium of 10%, and the required rate of return is 15%. So how will you calculate the value of this debt in this situation? How will you calculate the value of this debt in this situation? Can you reply in the chat? You need to discount the cash flows. So what are the cash flows here? What are the future cash flows here? What are the future cash flows here? Interest and principal. So how will you do it? We can simply discount the cash flows. So here the cash flows will be how much? So just do it next. Just wait. So can you see the Excel here? Okay, so can you see both the notepad as well as the Excel? Okay, fine. So calculate, how will you calculate it here? Just try to calculate the value of this bond. So what's the present value of future cash flows here? What's the present value of future cash flows here? So I've mentioned here, it's a 10% bond in issue. So 10% means, so for the cash flows here, it is redeemable in 5 years time, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So during the 5 years time, we need to discount this cash flows. So how will you do the discount? How will you the cash flows will get discounted? So in year 1 to year 5, every year the interest rate will be 10%. So the principal rate will be 10%. So 10% into, always we assume that the bond value, nominal value will be 100. So it will be 10 from year 1 to year 5. And the last year, they assume that it will get redeemed at a rate which is 10% premium. So it will nominal value plus a premium of 10%. So it will be 110. Okay. So the total value in the last year will be how much? It will be 120. So these are your future cash flows. So literally you have to calculate the present value of this future cash flows. You have to calculate the present value of the future cash flows. Is it clear now? Is it clear now? Can you hear me now? Okay, so now these items will get discounted at a rate of 15%. And we need to calculate the present value. So how will you calculate the present value here? I have told that there is a formula to calculate the present value, which will be is equal to NPV. Select the rate, which is 15%, and select the cash flows from year 1 to year 5. So it will be 88.2. So this is how we'll calculate the value of a bond in a very simple terms. Is it clear, everyone? Can you reply in the chat? Have you understood how to value the debt with the redeemable bond? Yes. So now the same way, there is something known as the redemption yield. So what do you mean by redemption yield? What do you mean by redemption yield? What do you mean by redemption yield? So redemption yield is simply the IRR of a investment. So redemption yield is literally the IRR of an investment. So for example, let's say, for example, we can take a question. Yes. So for example, let's assume that the company has a 10% bond, which is redeemable in 10 years at a premium of 10%, and its current market value is equal to 91.61. Its current market value is 91.61. In that scenario, how will you calculate the? So assume that it's 95. Okay, current market value is 95. So how will you calculate the redemption yield here? How will you calculate the redemption yield? Literally, you have to calculate the IRR of that project. Literally, you have to calculate the IRR. That's the redemption yield. Okay, so how will you calculate IRR here? Year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4,
5, then year 6, year 7, year 8, year 9, and year 10. Redemption yield here. Literally, you have to calculate the IRR of that investment. So it will include the cash flows. So what's the cash flows here? In year 0, when we purchase this bond, what's the market value? It is 95. When we purchase this bond, the market value is 95. Then from year 1 to year 10, every year there is an interest. What's the interest rate? 10%. So it is 10 into 100 nominal value, it will be 10 itself. So at the end of year 10, it will be 10. Now we have to consider it. So with respect to that 10, we need to include that value. What's the value here? With respect to that 10, we have to include that premium amount. So what is the premium? 10% premium. So it is 110. So it is 120. So literally, what's the yield? What's the yield here? What's the yield? Redemption yield? We have to calculate the IRR of this investment. So IRR is equal to IRR. Select the cash flows from year 0 to last year. From year 0 to last year. Yeah. So how much it is? How much it is? Your IRR of this project, or we can say that almost the return or the redemption yield of this particular bond will be how much? It is 11%. That is 11%. Is it clear, everyone? Yes. So we can say that, so literally when the redemption yield increases, what will happen to the value of the bond? As a conclusion, what we can arrive at, whenever there is an increase in the redemption yield, what will happen to the market value of the bond? What will happen to the market value of the bond? Will it go up or will it go down? Can you reply in the chat? So we have calculated the yield and we have calculated how to calculate the market value of a bond as well. So what happens if there is a change in the interest rate? So if the yield increases, literally the market value of the bond will go down. If the yield increases, the market value of the bond will go down. Okay. So because the return, that's a conclusion we can make. So let's say, for example, the same item, if you are discounting at 20%, if the yield is 20% and the other values are same, so if you calculate the NPV, into 20%, comma, select the cash flows from year 1 to year 5. So what's the value here? The value have fallen down to 74, right? So we can say that the value. So whenever there is a reduction in, whenever there is an increase in the yield, whenever there is an increase in yield, it will literally decrease the value of the bond in the market. Is it clear? Can you reply in the chat? Have you understood that concept? So on the base of this factor, on base of that factor, so if you want, we can calculate, this is how we can calculate the change in the value of a bond. But there is another method to do the same. That's what we are going to learn. So if you want to know the change in the market value of a bond with respect to the change in the yield, you can do it individually like this. But apart from that, if you want to know what's the change in the value of a bond with respect to a percentage change in the interest or the redemption yield, we have something known as duration. So duration is a method that we are going to discuss now. That will literally help you to come up with a more better conclusion. Is it clear? So just let's discuss about the duration. So just assume that for the same question which you have done now, so the duration. So next one we can going to discuss about the Maclaurin duration. So Maclaurin duration helps us to identify that if there is a percentage change in the yield of a bond, how it will impact the bond price. So first of all, we need to calculate the normal duration for it. Okay, so first of all, we'll calculate the normal duration. So I'll just give a question. So assume that you have a bond which is having a 10% rate of interest and redemption is after 5 years, and it is getting redeemed at a premium of 10%, and its current market value is 98. So first of all, we can calculate the redemption yield. We can calculate the redemption yield, and then we have to calculate the duration as well. So duration will literally help you to identify if there's a percentage change in the bond, how it will impact the bond price. At the same time, what do you mean by the duration? What do you mean by the term duration? We have discussed in the last class. What is the duration? It helps us to identify that what's the average time will it take to get the value of that project, right? So when it comes to bond, the duration you to understand that what's the average times it takes for a bond to pay its interest and principal. What is the average time takes for a bond to pay back its principal and the interest? So that's what we are trying to calculate using duration. So first of all, we'll calculate the redemption yield. So how much is the redemption? How will you calculate the redemption yield here? So it's a 5-year bond. Okay, so it's a 5-year bond. And we assume that the current market value is 98. So it's an outflow. So it's negative minus 98. And it is 10 is the interest rate. And the premium of 10%. Premium is 10%, so it will be 110. So what's the value here? 120. 120 is your total value of the bond. 120 is the total value of your bond, and you need to calculate the redemption yield. So how will you calculate the redemption yield? It is easy. It is IRR. Select the cash flows from year 0 to year 5. So what's the redemption yield here? What's the redemption yield here? %12, right? Okay. So now we have to calculate the duration. So how will you calculate the duration? How will you calculate the duration? For calculating the duration, we have to calculate the present value of these cash flows, right? So these are the cash flows, the future cash flows. And okay, so these are the future cash flows, and we need to calculate its present value. So what's the discount factor? You know that the yield is 12%, is equal to 1 divided by 1.12 raised to 1. So this is how we can predict the discount factor in Excel. So 1 divided by 1 plus 1 point raised to 1. So literally, if you drag it towards right, you can get the discount factors for the coming years. And now calculate the present value. So what's the present value here? It is cash flow multiplied by the rate of it, discounting factor. So 8.92, and you got the values here. Now we have to calculate the present value into year. So 8.928 into the year. So we'll just do the same for other columns, and we calculate the sum of it. Take the sum of these figures. Then we have to take the sum of the present value column as well. We have to take the sum of the present value column. So what's the duration here? The duration will be (412) present value into year column divided by 94 points. So how much it is? 4.18 years. So even though this bond is having a life of 5 years, literally through the premium and all this stuff, we can literally recover the principal and interest. The average time to recover the principal and interest of this bond will be 4.18 years. Is it clear? Can you reply in the chat how to calculate the bond duration? Okay, so this with this duration, we can calculate something known as modified duration. So what is modified duration? The modified duration is measuring the sensitivity of the market value of the bond. Modified duration will measure the sensitivity of the market value of the bond. So that is with respect to the change in the interest rate, how the bond price will change. So how to do it? The Macaulay duration divided by 1 plus the redemption yield. So what is the redemption yield here? In this question, the redemption yield is 12%. So how much it is? 3.73. The value is 3.73, or the modified duration will be 3.73 years. So with the help of this modified duration, so interpretation of modified duration means, like, what does it mean by modified duration? So we are actually calculating this modified duration to arrive at another conclusion. I will just conclude it. Okay. So with this modified duration calculation, we can calculate the change in bond price. We can calculate the change in bond price. Okay. So let's say the change in bond price is equal to minus D. The D is the modified duration into, so the equation is minus D into, D stand for the modified duration, into change in the interest. Okay. Change in interest. Change in the interest rate multiplied by the price of the bond. Change in the interest rate divided by multiplied by the. Okay, so what does it mean by it? So here we have got the modified duration as 3.73. So it means that in accordance to, so the change in interest rate. So let's say the change in interest rate is 2%, or if the change in interest rate by 1% or whatever it is. If you want to know the change in the price of the bond, so literally it means to say that, so the price of the bond with respect to that change in the interest rate, the bond value will change by 3.73 times. The bond value will change by 3.73 times. So that 3.73 times bond duration means that the value of that particular bond will change by 3.73 times the change in interest rate multiplied by the original value of the bond. Is it clear? So that's how the duration will help us to identify the fact that, so whenever there is a change in the redemption yield, we know that it will affect the price of the bond. But how to calculate it? We have a formula to calculate it. So this is how we'll calculate. First of all, you have to identify the duration, then calculate the modified duration. Then the change in bond price will be minus D. Minus D is like that duration into change in percentage terms, the change in the percentage of interest multiplied by the bond price. So that 3.73 means that if there is a change in the interest rate, that will change the price of that bond by this much times. Yeah, price means the current price of the bond. Is it clear now? How the duration helps us to do it? Yeah, it's like the sensitivity analysis of bond, the modified duration. Yes. Is it clear? Okay, fine. So next one. I hope you are aware about the main capital structure theories and all the stuffs. And do you want me to reverse it? It's a theory part. If you want, I can revise. So actually, this capital structure theory is from where we actually get that equation that we have learned in the last class with respect to APV. That K, the ungeared cost of equity, that equation, no, that is actually, after all, that's derived from M&M with the tax formula. So I hope you are aware about it. That's something very basic from F9. If you want me to revise, I will revise. And one of you want me to reverse that capital structure theories. Otherwise, we can move on to mergers and acquisition topic. Is there anyone who wants me to reverse this theories, the traditional M&M with the tax, without tax? I hope you know these theories. So with respect to that, with the tax theory, we have actually come up that formula, that is KE geared is equal to KE ungeared plus. So that formula we have learned, no? That is actually a derived formula from M&M with the tax theory. Okay. So basically, there are three theories associated to capital structure. So I hope all of you know the basic calculation of cost of capital and CAPM model. Is it clear for everyone? So these are some basic stuff. So if you want, I will just quickly go through. Yeah, right. So in capital structure theory, the first theory is traditional theory. So the traditional theory says that there is cost of equity plus cost of debt. So which one is more cheaper? Which one is more cheaper? Is it the cost of equity or cost of debt? Which one is more cheaper? Which one is more cheaper? Debt is more cheaper, right? So the traditional theory have suggest that. So this is about the impact of capital structure, the impact of financing on your capital structure. That's the topic. Okay. So when we discuss about the capital structure, there is a traditional theory. They said that since the debt is more cheaper, we need to inject more debt into your capital structure. We have to inject more debt into your capital structure. So if we inject more debt into your capital structure, what will happen there? The overall cost of capital of the company will reduce, isn't it? The overall capital structure of the company will reduce. Is it clear, guys? Okay, so it will increase your gearing as well. So this is their assumption, but we know that it's only to a certain limit. It is only to a certain limit. So it's like, let's say the graph, there is a graph for traditional theory. So the graph will be, we know that the cost of debt is, this is cost of debt, and the cost of equity is will be higher, and this x-axis represent the debt to equity proportion, and the y-axis is representing the cost. Y-axis is representing the cost. So when the traditional theory tries to convey the fact that we can literally reduce your overall cost of a company's cost of capital by introducing more debt into your capital structure. So when we introduce more debt into your capital structure, anyway, KE will increase because the risk of the shareholders are increasing. The KD will remain the same. It will be risk-free only to a certain point, because in reality, if the cost of debt is increasing, what will happen there? After a certain point, if you are asking for more debt, even the return also will be higher, because we know that depending on your credit score, the rate of interest will differ, right? When you're going for a loan arrangement or something like that. So that is quite obvious, that because even the financial providers have a risk there. Okay, so again, it will have an upward slope. So here, the weighted average of this KE and KD, that is WACC, or the cost of capital, right? So the cost of capital will be like this. So it will initially go down because of the impact of introducing the debt. But after that point, again, the WACC will go up. So it will be like a slope. It will be like this curve. So we know that the WACC is minimum at a point. The WACC is minimum at a point. So this point is known as optimum gearing point. This point is known as optimum gearing point. Optimum gearing point at which the WACC will be minimum. Since the WACC will be minimum at this point, there the market value of the company will be maximum. Is it clear, everyone? Can you reply in the chat? So if the WACC is minimum at this point, we'll assume that there the market value of the company will be maximum. So this is what is explained in traditional theory. But in contradiction to traditional theory, the M&M have came up with a theory, that is M&M with the tax equation. M&M with the tax. Sorry, M&M without tax. Sorry, initially they have come up with M&M with the tax, without tax. So in M&M without tax theory, they have told that the WACC will not have any impact because of your capital structure. Otherwise, the capital structure will not have any impact on WACC. So that was explained by M&M without tax. So they assume that the debt is completely risk-free. The debt is completely risk-free. The KD will remain constant. The debt is completely risk-free, and the increase in KE will get compensated by a lower debt, so that the WACC will remain constant. This is the proposal of M&M without tax. So M&M without tax assume that the cost of the capital structure or the capital structure of the company will not have any impact on your WACC. They assume that the cost of debt is completely risk-free and it will remain constant. So this is KE. So this part is KE. This one is KE. So that increase in KE will get compensated by a cheaper debt, so that the WACC will remain constant there. Is it clear? So this remains the debt to equity ratio. Is it clear? So this is what it has been proposed by M&M without tax. But later on, they understood their mistake and they have come up with another proposal, that is M&M with tax. So they are told that M&M with the tax. So in the M&M with the tax situation, they have come up with a conclusion that this KD into 1 minus T. So they have to consider the fact that there is tax, and because of the tax, the debt will be more cheaper now because we will get tax savings on interest, and the increase in KE will get accompanied by a very cheaper debt. As a result, the WACC will go down. As a result, the WACC will go down as the level of debt increases. So the company needs to take maximum level of debt so that the WACC will be minimum at this point. That's what they have concluded in M&M with the tax formula. So with respect to this particular theory, actually we have arrived at that formula, that is KE is equal to the formula which we used to calculate the ungeared cost of equity, right? So that is actually derived from this particular theory. That is KE geared is equal to KE ungeared plus KE ungeared minus cost of debt into D by E into 1 minus T. So there is 1 minus T as well. Okay. So this formula has been actually derived from this theory. M&M with the tax theory. So from there, actually, we are moving into that APV. So APV is just a result of this particular theory. So it means to say that when there's a change in the capital structure is where we are actually calculating APV, right? So this is actually a theory with respect to that APV. So that's how we arrive at that concept of APV actually. So how much did? Yeah, that's what literally in reality, this theory cannot be accepted. But they are making some assumption. They assume that it's a perfect capital market. There is no transaction cost. All of them will have equal knowledge, and there won't be any kind of that is completely risk free. So these are certain assumptions that they put forward here. But we literally know that it's up to the investors' appetite, the shareholders' risk appetite. We won't be taking much debt, but they just consider that what to say, the financial effects. That's it. They haven't considered that non-financial impact. Is it clear? That's what this all are assumptions, especially this all are assumptions, as you said. In reality, that's what whenever we do a calculation, no, we will discuss the assumptions and we will discuss its drawbacks in your answers. Is it clear, everyone? Yes. So just 1 minute. Let me add it to this note. So if you have any other doubts with respect to this, you can ask me. Okay. I'm just adding this notepad to your word. Otherwise, I will miss it out. Okay, guys. So is it clear that three theories? Can you reply in the chat? Okay. So next one we'll discuss about the mergers and acquisition topic. So before we move into that calculation part, so first of all we'll discuss about the main theories. So in mergers and acquisition, first of all we'll think about the fact that what's the reason the company is going for a merger and acquisition rather than organic growth, rather than having an organic growth. What's the reason by which the company is going for a merger or acquisition? Why? What's the reason we are going for a merger or acquisition? It is simply to expand very rapidly, right? Because organic growth may take time. So we literally can increase the shareholders' wealth by literally acquiring a company at a lower price. So by through bargain, you can literally purchase a company which is having a good future growth perspective. We can buy it at a lower rate, and ultimately, if that acquisition successful, it will increase the wealth of a shareholder. And apart from that, especially if they are in the same industry line, as a result of that merger, there will be synergy benefits such as cost synergy, revenue synergy, financial synergy. So there can be different synergies that ultimately help us to overtake or being a monopoly in the market. We can easily remove the competition. Is it clear? Can you reply in the chat? Okay. So again, there are some defensive tactics. So these are the different advantages of a target company. But what for advantages of a predator, or in the sense the company, the acquiring company, the acquirer. But with respect to the target company, obviously they will lose their individuality. So they will do some defensive techniques to work different. They will use some defensive techniques that can work out against, that can be worked out against the predator, especially if it's a hostile takeover. So what are the different ways in which can they do it? Can you just give me what are the different ways in which we can defend against a takeover? Crown jewel. So what is crown jewel? We are selling off the attractive assets of a company so that the company will become less attractive, and the predator or the hostile predator will get less interested in our company, right? Yes. Then we have poison pills. Then white knight. So what do you mean by white knight? Finding a white knight. Yeah, it's like we, instead of getting taken over by a hostile bidder, we'll look for a friendly company, like someone who already knows about it, right? There's another factor, that is management buyout. Management buyout is another method to like defend against the acquisition. Then anything else? So what do you mean by this poison pill tactics? So let's say that the company will give some certain kind of stock split So in which at the case of an acquisition, literally the shares will will be redeemable at a higher price. So with respect to the acquirer, they may feel it more expensive. In the same way, there are some conditions in which they will give higher payments to they will keep higher payments as redundancy cost. So when there is a takeover, literally some of the staffs needs to be redundant, especially the directors and all. So the defender, with respect to that particular point of view of a investor, they may find it more expensive now. So these are different ways in which can protest against the acquisition. So whenever there is a hostile bidder, these are the different ways of defensive tactics, which will be taken by a target company. Okay, so we have to learn the theories. So I will just give a theory note. It includes a certain number of questions. You can just go through it. Okay, I'm not focusing much on theory now. So next one is about the valuation. So what are the ways in which you can value the merger? So what are the different valuations available for us? We have asset-based valuation. So even in asset-based, we have book value approach. We have realizable value approach. Then we have replacement value approach. Okay, so in the valuation model, the first way to value a company, when we're literally going for an acquisition, we have to value it. Then only we'll get to know that whether it is worth or not, right? So in order to do that, we need to know the business valuation methods. So in during that valuation, we have got in the asset-based model, we have got three different models. That is book value approach, the realizable value approach, and the replacement value approach. So how will you do the valuation with respect to a book value approach? It is literally easy, right? First, we will take the book value of asset and we'll compare with the book value of liability, and that will give you a net amount. But it literally literally does not represent the true value of the company, because the company obviously will have some kind of goodwill or like brand name they have that will not be recognized in the books of an item. So we know that the internally generated intangible assets are not recognized in the FS, right? If you have studied accounts, you know that. So if you are just calculating the value of a company on the basis of its book value, then it does not actually represent the true value of an asset. So it's very rarely we use that book value approach to calculate the value of a company. So if the book value is not available, then we'll use the realizable value. So what is the realizable value? So that's the minimum amount that we have to pay to the seller. That's a selling price. That's the minimum amount that we have to pay to the seller. So when we value the asset at which they could be sold individually, the price at which the asset should be sold individually, that is what known as the realizable value. That's the minimum acceptable price we should offer to our target company. Then what is replacement value? Replacement value is something like that's a maximum amount. That's a maximum amount we can expect a acquirer to give, or the acquirer to offer to a target company. Because this is by considering the going concern factor. Okay, so literally the asset will be valued using three different approach: the book value approach, the realizable value approach, and the replacement value approach. So replacement is actually considering the going concern of the company. So realizable value is like literally the minimum price accepted by target. Book value is actually it is not representing the true value of asset. It's not representing the true value. So it's really in a very rare situation we will use the book value approach. Okay, is it clear, everyone? So this replacement value will be the maximum that the acquiring company, that is the acquirer company, prepared to pay. Maximum that the acquirer company will be ready to pay for the asset by considering the going concern factors. Okay, especially the goodwill and all this stuff. So that's a maximum that the acquirer will be ready to pay or prepared to pay the target. So these are the three different approaches we can value the company on the basis of its asset. This is an asset-based approach. Is it clear, everyone? Can you reply in the chat? The valuation model that is using asset-based approach, and which all situations. So what is it's very important to know that what each value represent. So the realizable value represent the minimum price accepted by the target. The replacement value represent the maximum that the acquirer will be ready to pay. Okay. Then we have cash flow based approach. So in the cash flow based approach, we have two methods. That is free cash flow to firm and free cash flow to equity. So in the free cash flow to firm method, we will calculate the free cash flows available to the company, and we will discount it at WACC, the overall cost of capital of the company. Then we will get the total value of the company. From that, we will deduct from the total value of the company, we will deduct the value of debt. Then we will get the value of equity. That approach is known as free cash flow to firm approach. Then we'll calculate the free cash flow to equity approach. So what is free cash flow to equity approach? There, in free cash flow to equity approach, first of all, we'll predict the free cash flow to equity, and we'll discount it with the cost of ungeared cost of equity. Then you will get the value of equity there. Is it clear, everyone? Okay, guys. So how will you calculate the free cash flow to equity as well as free cash flow to firm? What's the format? That is PBIT. I have to take the PBIT. So from PBIT, we'll deduct tax. Then we'll add the depreciation. Then we will get the operating cash flow. Then we'll get the operating cash flow. From that, we'll deduct investment in non-current assets and working capital. Okay. Then you will get, as a final figure, we will get the free cash flow to firm. Is it clear, everyone? How to calculate the free cash flow to firm? So from this free cash flow to firm, if you want to calculate the free cash flow to equity, then from this amount we need to deduct the debt interest paid and any repayments of loans, and we'll add any cash raised from loan issue. Then you will get the free cash flow to equity. Is it clear, everyone? How to calculate the free cash flow to firm and free cash flow to equity? So if it's a free cash flow to firm method, then the calculation is literally easy. You can just discount this cash flow, the free cash flow to firm. That cash flow will be discounted at WACC, the overall WACC of the company. Then you will get the total value. From that total value, we need to deduct the value of debt. Then if it is free cash flow to equity, we'll calculate the free cash flow to equity and then we'll deduct the, we'll discount at the cost of equity rate, ungeared cost of equity. But in reality, in the most situations, we'll use the free cash flow to firm method because it will not be that much easy to calculate the ungeared cost of equity. So theoretically it's possible, but in the practical scenarios, we have got these two methods. You might be getting a question that's at the end of the day, both will give the same amount, right? It is giving the value of equity, but it's not. The values will be different, but the reliability will be more for the free cash flow to firm compared to free cash flow to equity. Is it clear, everyone? Is it clear, everyone? But when we calculate the value of a firm using WACC, you need to understand different situations. First one, if there is a change in the business risk, if you are going to acquire a completely different industry, so can you use your existing WACC there? No, we have to use the risk adjusted WACC. We have to use the risk adjusted WACC to calculate the value of that firm. The same way, if there is a change the business risk and there is a substantial change in the financial risk of the company. In that scenario, we have to use a APV approach. We have to use a APV approach. Is it clear, everyone? Can you reply in the chat, guys? Okay. So we have discussed about the free cash flow model and we have discussed about the free cash flow to equity model. Then we have market-based model. So what is market-based model? That is market value of a company is equal to market value per share multiplied by number of shares. Multiplied by number of shares. Then we have the PE ratio method. So what is PE ratio? PE ratio indicates the confidence of the shareholders in the market about our company, or the price which is prepared to be paid for the shares of our company. That's what mean by PE ratio, right? So how will you calculate PE ratio? Is market price divided by earnings per share. So if you know the PE ratio of that industry, then we can calculate the market value of a target company using the PE ratio method. How will you calculate it? The market value of a target company is equal to PE ratio of a similar quoted company. Then we will multiply with the earnings available for shareholders, especially the profit after tax. So this is how we'll calculate the market value of a target company which is quoted. Let's say the company is unquoted. So in that scenario, we won't be getting the PE ratio. So normally we'll assume that we need to make changes to PE ratio when it's a unlisted company. So it will be given in your exam. So it will be from the exam perspective. So in reality, we have to make the changes. Normally, we used to assume that it is 10% lower than the PE ratio of a unquoted company will be 10% lower than the PE ratio of a same industry target company, same industry's listed company. So it will be given in exam. So whatever the appropriate changes we have to make with respect to that PE ratio will be given in the exam. Then that adjusted PE ratio multiplied by the profit after tax of our target company will give you the value of our target company. Is it clear, everyone? Can you reply in the chat? Okay. So is there any other approaches apart from this? Is there any other approaches apart from this to value a company? Market to book ratio. Yeah. So more importantly, we have other model. So yesterday we have discussed about BSOP model, right? So using the BSOP model, we can actually, so using that BSOP model, we can actually calculate the value of a company, especially the startups. So here we'll assume that holding shares in a company is like a holding, it's like holding a call option. Okay, we'll assume that holding shares in a company is like a call option. Because let's say if the debt in the company, if the debts in a company, if it is exceeding that asset value, then what will the shareholders will do there? The shareholders will simply walk away from the company, right? The same way, if the asset exceeds the value of the debt, then we will continue to hold that shares in the company. So literally, this particular call option is like an option to buy, right? So the holding shares in a company reflects the holding shares in a company reflects the call option. Okay, the nature of a call option. So we have to calculate the call option of a company. So you know what's the formula. It will be given. Yesterday I've shown that. That is PA plus that figure will be given in the question. Here the question is we need to identify the PA, PE, R, the time to expiry, and S. So we need to identify these items. So what is PA here? When we are using the Black-Scholes formula, the PA will be the fair value of firm assets. The fair value of firm's assets. Yeah, we can calculate like in Excel, like we have the formulas of calculating ln. So we can put is equal to ln and exponential. Everything is there in the Excel. Okay, but you have to do it separately. Yeah, but the ND1 and ND2 we have to check the table anyway. Okay, so then PE will be the amount owing to lenders. Then R is a risk-free rate. Then T the time until the debt is ready. Then estimates the standard deviation, the value of assets. Is it clear? So that is very rarely trusted, this part, but just understand that even this BSOP model can be used to calculate the value of, especially for the startup company, we can use it. Is it clear? Okay, so that's it for the mergers and acquisition part. Okay, so I'll just show you what are the important questions you have to do with respect to acquisition and mergers. So these are the questions we can do with respect to acquisition and mergers. It is Saloni, McConis, Vogel, Toltec, and Chithurst. Is it clear? Can you see the Excel now? So just try to do these questions. These are related to acquisition and merger. So we have learned every important theories that needs to be learned with respect to the valuation. So we can just go through it. Yeah. These are these questions are sufficient. Like if you practice these questions, now you will like these questions covers almost every adjustments. So that's enough to get a good idea about the questions. And obviously, you have to practice the latest, at least 2 or 3 sample papers. Then that's more than enough. Okay, guys. So the corporate reconstruction part we'll discuss in the next class. So today we have discussed the important theories and the calculations with respect to acquisition and mergers. I hope you understood that part. It's not compulsory that project appraisal should come, but anyway, it will have a weightage around 20 to 25 marks. Weightage will be there either as an APV question or as a foreign NPV question. It will get tested most probably. Yeah, I will share the group. I will share the WhatsApp group. Okay, guys. Yeah, forex is a short question in the most situations, but even we have seen that in past they are not testing any futures or options in your paper. They are just focused on the MMH and the money market hedging. That is something we learn in F9. So there are chances that it will get tested and it might not get tested. So it depends upon the examiner's mindset. But that's the reason I've told that we can't. But literally, there is a very higher chance that one question will be from forex or interest rate risk management. It's not completely forex. The risk management will be worth 25 marks. But that's a hope. That's a hope we have. Okay, guys. So that's it. And for theory, I will just share a PDF right now in the group. You can just go through that questions. So it's a list of questions that has been repeatedly tested in the past.